Another Wednesday is in the books, which means it's time to review AEW Dynamite and WWE NXT, and a lot to cover, including MJF and the 10 lashings to Cody Rhodes and the return of the Velveteen Dream. Hello and welcome to the Squared Circle Psychobabble. My name is Michael Valenti. This is Ralph Valenti for news, reviews, and conversations on all things pro wrestling. Subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. Ralph, I thought we had two very good shows last night. So let's start with the highlights from both shows. AEW Dynamite, NXT. What was your highlight from the shows last night?
Without question, I think this is probably the highlight of both shows, and I'm sure most people are going to agree with this. I have to say that the 10 lashings was definitely my favorite segment, and definitely the highlight of AEW.
Yeah, definitely.
It was a segment that I was a little reluctant about because I didn't know how the crowd was going to react. I didn't know if it was going to come off good on TV. The reason I say that is a lot of times in professional wrestling, you see a lot of recycled storylines, recycled segments where even if it's not exactly the same, there's some subplot that is very similar. Off the top of my head, I can't necessarily think of anything that is directly kind of related to this or similar to this.
Maybe the Wyatt Bryan strap match, but
yeah,
that's like the closest thing.
Sure, you're going to have strap matches, but something like this, if it's been done before, it's not something that I remember from recent memory.
Right.
So I think it went over well. It was definitely well received because MJF got a shit ton of heat.
Yep.
And Cody Rhodes looked incredibly sympathetic. MJF got so much heat that I think a fan actually tried to attack him at the end of the show. And I don't know if that was all scripted.
I think it was a
great.
plant. I think it was a plant. Some people were saying it was Michael Nakazawa. Some people were even saying it was Frankie Kazarian.
Okay.
So I'm pretty sure it was not a real fan, but a fan.
Yeah.
Just to add to the heat of MJF. But I got to tell you, like you, I was very reluctant on this segment, how this was going to be portrayed. And I'll be honest with you, this was probably the best segment AEW has ever produced since they've been on TNT.
Yeah.
It was that good. The storytelling was good. The pacing of the segment was good. I liked how Arn came out. Then Dustin came out. Then the Bucks came out. But what really hit home for me was when Brandy came out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, dropped the Nightmare Collective character. And because this is more than just being a character. This is her husband is being whipped. And you could see the red marks on his back. And that close up of Cody kissing Brandy's hand, it was like, if you're one that opens the tear jerkers, that one did it.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, one of the things that can kind of relate to this, I guess, is back in the day when, Queen Elizabeth reunited with Macho Man.
Yep, WrestleMania 7.
Things like that. I mean, something that the fans can relate to. And I know that a lot of people always get down on WWE for having, too much storylines, too many segments, too much sports entertainment, if you will. This is about as close, I would think, that you can get to sports entertainment, but have it work. This worked. This generated heat for MJF, which is what you want nowadays in professional wrestling, and that it's very difficult to do because usually what happens now is the heel gets cheered. It's happened multiple times, usually with guys like Kevin Owens, because they are respected for their work in the ring. But once they turn heel, the fans are going to naturally be attracted to that. So he's just one example of many throughout the years, recently. So even though this is probably closer to the sports entertainment side of things on like the scale of, this is wrestling, this is sports entertainment, you got to have segments like this because it helps to build a story. Yes, it's a professional wrestling TV show, but at the same time, you need to have segments like this to get the fans invested in, have some of that human emotion. And one of the things you'll notice, if you look at the TV screen, or if you look at the audience during this whole thing, there wasn't a single person sitting. So literally everybody's invested in it. Everybody's reacting to it. So I thought it made for a really good segment.
Yeah, it really did. And honestly, like I said, the best segment AEW has produced since they've been on TNT. The storytelling was definitely there. And honestly, the storytelling for AEW as a whole in this episode, I thought was very good.
Yep.
I thought the show started off with Moxley and Ortiz. That match was very good. I liked the eye for an eye thing with the key that for the car used to, gouge the eye of Santana. Santana cutting an awesome promo later on in the show. We got a match next week between those two. I liked Hangman Page again. His storytelling has been very, very good, and there's a reason why so many fans are loving him right now. Just everything, and even the Pac, Kenny Omega thing there, that I like that as well. And the Nyla Rose powerbomb through Riho. It's nice to see Riho on TV.
85 pounds just isn't enough force to go through a
my
table,
God.
Apparently. So
even with Nyla
Rose. But there was a lot of good things that came out of Dynamite this week, and like I said, it's good because this was a good episode because it definitely progressed a lot of the storylines and built upon either some rivalries that have been building for the last several weeks or some things that they are teasing. Dark Order, who knows what's going on with Christopher Daniels? Is he truly the leader of the Dark Order, as many people speculate? I'm going to say no, because that would be the obvious thing. And they're laying it on a little thick. If it does end up being him, okay, it's fine, whatever. At least he's somebody who is recognizable enough, unless it ends up being Harper, but you really don't know what's going on with that. Right. So yeah, a lot of storyline progression, and most of it was really well done.
Yeah, it definitely was. And I got to say the same thing about NXT too. Like NXT, this show for NXT was, the past weeks have been wrestling match, just 2 hours of wrestling matches, which isn't a bad thing, but they don't really do storyline things. This episode had a good balance of both.
Yeah.
The opening segment with Matt Riddle and Pete Dunne in the Undisputed Era, I personally liked it. I really like the dynamic of the laid back Matt Riddle and this so serious Pete Dunne. It's working very well. The Rhea Ripley, Charlotte, Bianca Belair segment, the return of Velveteen Dream was awesome. I'm glad that he's back after his injury, but the Gargano Balor segment to me was the best thing of the night.
I actually agree with that. I love this. I definitely liked back and forth between the two. I think that it got personal enough, especially when he started talking about, I don't want the Finn Balor from SmackDown or Raw. Right. I want the Finn Balor that used to, whatever he said, wrestle here in NXT. And he pointed out that, I don't want the guy that lost to Bobby Lashley for like 7 weeks straight or whatever.
17 weeks straight.
Yeah. A pretty big dig at a guy who has accomplished a lot in the main roster, but definitely underutilized. And I can't wait for that match.
Yeah, that match is going to be good. And let's talk about the return of the Velveteen Dream. It was hinted throughout the night, and I did like this. The 2-5-20 that we saw last week and on social media, who could it be? I kind of knew it was Velveteen Dream, but just that they kept glimpsing it in through different aspects of the show. Like they're promoting Charlotte and Rhea and the graphic, and then they just blip it in there like Dark Order stuff that we saw a couple months back. I thought that was good. The way he was reintroduced, I know the lights out thing has been kind of overused, but it kind of worked in this regard because he comes out and then it's the purple light that reintroduces him, and he does, he clears house with the Undisputed Era, goes after Roderick Strong, who's the one that took him out. And I love the tights. The tights were awesome. Having Marina Shafir on the tights, very Rick Rude-esque. The guy just gets it. I love Velveteen Dream. The guy just gets it. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. Definitely a good to see him back because he's one of the more talented guys on the NXT roster. I'm going to imagine that match will take place at TakeOver, maybe, which is already a extremely stacked card.
Yeah.
So having him on that would just really kind of be like the icing on the cake for me.
Yeah, I agree. So if that match does happen, it just adds to the awesomeness that this card has. And one match that might not be on TakeOver, but could be at WrestleMania, really had their first focus at NXT, and that is Rhea Ripley and Charlotte Flair. I got to admit, this was kind of a low point for me.
Yeah, see, I was kind of on the fence based off what people were saying, like just based off people's feedback. I watched it. I didn't necessarily think it was great. I didn't think it was bad either. Mm-hmm. I think that Bianca Belair actually did really well in her role.
Yes, I agree.
Even though she's somebody that it seems like they're teasing that they're going to put her on the back burner or be somebody that's overlooked. I actually think this is going to end up being a triple threat at WrestleMania. I think they're going to work her in there she's really talented. And
Yes.
now she's able to kind of show that she has some charisma to herself, especially last night. Charlotte did have a really good comeback, and this is one of the lines that I thought was really well done, and maybe the line of the night when she said, "All right, go over there and fix your braid."
Yeah.
And the crowd was just like, "Oh." So
Yeah.
I thought it was good enough for what it was.
Yeah, I guess, but I just thought it kind of fell flat for something that's starting this feud with Rhea and Charlotte and Bianca. And I mean, Bianca was awesome, but I thought Charlotte and Rhea it was just kind of flat to me. But AEW Dynamite, what was the low point there, if there was anything?
So, and this is kind of nitpicky a little bit, only because the shows were really good, but I'm going to have to say the use of the big men, if you will, right? Because one of the knocks for AEW is that they don't necessarily have a lot of guys that have a lot of size or that necessarily are very intimidating. Of the guys that competed last night, I think one would obviously be the Butcher, who, if you go back and watch the matches without going into too much detail, just the way he was used, he got a lot. The Young Bucks or whoever it was got a lot of offense at the expense of him.
Yep.
I think they can do a better job of building him up as an intimidating guy because he is one of the larger characters. And then to me, the biggest miss of all is Wardlow. And I say that because he's a guy that has been working in the same role as MJF's muscle or bodyguard. And it's not like they've really established him as this intimidating character. He's essentially just a guy that walks out to the ring with MJF and holds a microphone for him here and there.
Right.
I mean, we haven't really seen him get physical until kind of last night, if you want to consider the one lashing, which was, was good and it got a good reaction from the crowd. But what I'd like to have seen them done with him is even have a couple of squash matches, even if it was where, he beat up a couple of guys that were trying to get an MJF's face or something like that, just to establish him as a more dominant character, especially going into the match with Cody. Because if you think about this, if they were able to build him up, if they were able to even give him like a finishing move that nobody's been able to kick out of, that would mean more for him going into this match, because it would mean more for Cody if he beat him. And imagine if they did establish like a finishing move for him and Cody kicks out of that. It would mean that match right now, that steel cage match, is going to be a real significant match because it's going to be the first one in AEW history. If they established him a little bit more and built him up, it would mean more.
I get what you're saying, and what I would add to that is I don't necessarily think you have to give him squash matches. It would help, but I think just the sheer fact of him being physical in segments with MJF.
Yes, yeah.
In that moment where Dustin and Wardlow are squaring off, I wouldn't say necessarily attack him then, but maybe at the end of the night, rather than MJF just running away with Wardlow, Wardlow could kind of fight off a couple of the guys and, power bomb them, do something with them, and then go off with MJF.
Yeah, just something to establish that, all we can kind of go off right now is the hype package from right before he debuted. Like, I don't remember if that was All Out, maybe.
That was All Out.
So that we have to go based off that. And I think the most physical, interaction he's had is when he like pushed over DDP or pushed DDP at one point.
Well, his debut, when he came out from the crowd and attacked, I think it was Cody.
I mean, but how long ago was that? So that's my point. Like they could do more. And, if you think back to some of the better bodyguards or muscle characters, Sid for Shawn Michaels, Diesel, just to name a few, he reminds me more of like Big E with Dolph Ziggler. Like, it was like, he didn't even necessarily really get physical. It was just kind of like he just was there and it didn't make sense.
Right.
So, especially going into this big match next week, or in 2 weeks, I'm sorry, with Cody, it would mean a lot more. So
True.
That to me is the low light of AEW.
Yeah, if I had to really say a low light, it would be the Joey Janela Kip Sabian match. Not saying it was a bad match. First off, they've been kind of building this match for a while, and to have it on an episode of Dynamite, which already had kind of a stacked card where the 8-man tag and the 10 lashings, Moxley versus Ortiz. And then this match is just unannounced, put on the show.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of feels like they already put it on the back burner. And I feel like Joey Janela's storylines, whether deserving or not, have had this like, oh, we're giving him a storyline, but then his payoffs end up on Dark or unannounced on Dynamite or thrown together on a pay-per-view. Nothing really comes of them. And I feel like this happened here. Now, the feud could still continue because of how the match finished, with Janela inadvertently hitting Penelope Ford, Kip Sabian with the surprise roll-up victory. But I just feel like because of everything else that happened, this comes at you like, oh, these guys are feuding, but I don't have any investment because I'm focused on everything else. So that would really be my low light for AEW. So considering that, both shows here, we're really nitpicking at what the low lights were. It's going to be hard to say which show was the better show. Mm-hmm. The ratings did come out, and both shows actually went up in viewership despite the impeachment coverage, which you would think would kill the ratings. Actually, AEW went up from a 0.34 to a 0.36, gaining 100,000 viewers last night. NXT, they stayed at 0.22, which was their rating last week, but they also gained nearly 60,000 viewers. So people were invested for whatever reason, whether it was Charlotte for NXT or the 10 lashings for AEW. Which did you think was the better show?
I thought AEW was the better show. Especially I thought it was the better show because, like I said, whenever you're watching these two shows and trying to compare them, they're both going to be very good more times than they're not. But one of them will usually have that one segment where you're like, okay, I watched this, I watched that. What stands out to me? The lashing segment with Cody Rhodes and MJF, that just stands out to me head and heels above everything else. And that's what separates the two in my mind from two good shows next to each other.
Yeah, I agree. That Cody MJF segment, I think, is going to be talked about for the rest of the year, especially if this feud pays off with a good match.
Well, not only that depending on what happens with AEW and Cody Rhodes, it could be looked back on as one of the more iconic moments in wrestling history. Now, Cody has a long way to go before he retires, you'd imagine.
Right.
So will people look back on that as like one of the more iconic things to happen? It certainly could be. It all depends what happens with his career.
You can also say the same thing about MJF. MJF is only 23 years old. So, the sky's the limit with him as being one of the top heels in the business. Like right now, he's probably the best heel in professional wrestling. But, could he be eventually if he plays his cards right and wrestling gets back to that boom that it once had, and he's on the forefront for the heels? Will he be talked about with the Ric Flairs, the Vince McMahons, big top heels like that, Shawn Michaels? Mm-hmm. He could.
Papa Shango.
No.
It was worth a shot.
The Good Father was a better heel than Papa Shango.
Nobody casts a spell on the Ultimate Warrior quite like Papa Shango. I was forever scarred in my childhood watching the Ultimate Warrior throw up green stuff all over the mat.
That is true. That is true. So, vote on the eye above my head. Which show is better? Comment below what you thought were the best moments and the worst moments of each show. Don't forget to share us all over social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at SCPB Podcast. And for news, reviews, and conversations on all things pro wrestling, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. For the Papa Shango loving Ralph Valenti, my name's Michael Valenti. Thank you for watching the Squared Circle Psychobabble.